Force Unleashed 2 ends with Darth Vader on his knees, taken prisoner by a clone of the apprentice he built himself, and then it rolls the credits and asks you to wait for the next one. There was never going to be a next one. It has already been cancelled 2 months before this game reached a single store. Not after the reviews landed, not after anyone looked at the sales, but back in August of 2010, while the disc for this one was still being printed. So the cliffhanger I sat through last night was written as the setup for a game that no longer exists by the time anybody could buy the setup. I finished it in 5 hours, and what I didn't expect, walking in with all of that already in my head, is that for the first 2 of those hours, I thought I was playing something genuinely great. So this won't be a video about a bad Star Wars game, because it isn't one. It's about the sequel that quietly fixed almost everything people hated about the first one and still came apart in my hands. And the reason had almost nothing to do with the people who made it. I played the 2008 original earlier in this year, so all of it was still fresh. The good parts and the parts that made me want to throw something, which is probably why I noted the most important thing about the sequel roughly 10 minutes in. The freaking camera works. That sounds like nothing, and it's everything. In the first game, the camera was an enemy in its own right. It wedged itself behind walls, snapped to useless angles in the middle of boss fights, and hit attacks that were already on the way to my face. This is the single reason I put the controller down more than once. Here it just quietly does its job, and the one fix makes everything downstream of it feel better than it has any right to. Then there's the fighting, which they rebuilt around the second lightsaber, still held in that reversed grip, now doubled, with its own crystal in each hilt, so you tune in 2 weapons instead of 1. The combos run longer and get more interesting, and the whole timing moves smoother, less jerky, less like wrestling with the animation. They also added Force Fury, and it's the best decision in the game. It works like Devil Trigger in Devil May Cry. You hold it in reverse, and in the moment a boss starts winning, you spend it and take the fight back. That's a real decision with a cost attached, not a light show. Which is more than I can say for the other new power. Thought I'll come back to that. Because the headline edition was Mind Trick, and they knew it. It gets its own cutscene where you reach into the stormtrooper's head and he walks calmly across the room, opens a window and steps out of it, because you told him to. And then there's a spectacle, which is completely out of this mind in the best way. You leap off a tower the size of the city block, you free fall through open sky shading a titan and hammer it mid-air with your bare hands like Kratos. You point a starship at a building from the orbit and jump out of the thing on the way down. The power fantasy is cranked so past the sane that your brain simply gives up and enjoys it, and I mean that as a praise. It looks expensive too. 2 hours in, I hadn't walked through a single ugly rusted corridor, which is not something you could say about most games of that era. 2 hours in, I was thinking they listened, they actually fixed this. 2 hours in, I was also 40% finished. Somewhere about the 2/3 marks, the game stopped giving you things and starts stalling instead. And you can feel exactly what's happening. Enemies begin arriving in waves every few seconds, over and over, because somebody needs the clock to keep running. What makes it worse is that the enemy design starts working against the combat system they just improved. There are little spider things whose entire purpose in life is to stun lock you out of whatever you were doing. There are robots you can only handle by throwing a saber and mashing a button prompt, and a rocket droid fight where you stand, wait, catch, show it back, and then stand and wait again. Worst of all, enemies get split by damage type. This one only takes the force. That only takes the blade, which quietly cuts your combos option in half in a game where best feature is battle system. DMC Devil May Cry made the same mistake years later with weapons typed enemies, and it goes stiff for the exact same reason. And remember Mind Trick, the one with the cutscene? After that introduction, you are using it a handful of times, plus once on a crowd during Force Fury where 6 or 7 troopers suddenly decide they're rebels. And that's the entire life of that mechanic. It's weak, it's get boring fast, and saber combos plus throwing people into walls is quicker and hits harder. So you stop reaching for it. The sequel's headline power turns out to be a cutscene and a novelty. LucasArts also promised an improved targeting system for this game, which is worth mentioning because grabbing and throwing objects is exactly as clumsy as it was in 2008. You reach for a barrel and the game hands you a trooper instead. They advertised the fix, and I didn't notice it there. The bosses are the strangest part of all this, because the idea behind them is genuinely better and one of the worst things in the game. There is a giant monster fight where you mash a button to pin its arms, and the animation crawls. Starkiller fires a force blast and inches one arm over, then the other, then the head. For something like 30 seconds while I sat there convinced that I was doing it wrong. Get past that, and the fight turns into you leaping around a level the thing is actively tearing apart. And that's the point. The bosses aren't damage sponges you stop until they fall over, the way the first games were. They are events, built the way the God of War original trilogy built them, and it mostly works. But then the final boss undoes the goodwill in about 4 minutes. It's there. And it's the one sequence repeated 5 or 6 times with identical animations on every loop. Wait for the swing, parry, get your hits in, watch a quick time cutscene, and then he leaps away to throw Bacta tanks at you while clones jump on your back. Clear the clones, throw to Bacta's back, leap on his platform, and repeat again, again, and again. Underneath all of it sits an upgrade system they hollowed out, where points go in and nothing come back out that you can feel. Leveling up in the first game changed the way you thought. Here it's the menu you visit between fights out of habit. So I finished a sequel that had solved the camera, smoothed out the combat and rebuilt its bosses into spectacle. And I still put the controller down feeling like somebody had handed me a half of a game. Which is the question this whole video exists to answer. How does a game fix that much and still arrive cut in half? The answer isn't anywhere in the game. It's in the building the game came out of. The plan has been a trilogy, and that isn't a rumor. Haden Blackman, the producer who ran the whole Force Unleashed project, he talked about where it was going. First game, Vader builds a weapon and the weapon turns on him. Second game, Vader tries again with the clone. Third game, the two of them against the Emperor together. It's a decent shape of a story with one condition attached. A middle chapter only works if the third one actually arrives. The game shipped on October 26, 2010. Hold that date because there are the 5 months in front of it. In May, the president of LucasArts, Daryl Rodriguez, resigned after roughly 2 years in the chair, and several other senior executives leave around the same time. In June, Paul Megan arrives from Epic Games to replace him, carrying a mandate to cut. In late July, Blackman resigns. The producer of this game, the man who built Starkiller and knew where the trilogy was heading, walking out 3 months before his own sequel reaches shelves. In August, Kotaku reports that Megan has cancelled the third Force Unleashed while it's set in pre-production, along with another announcement project, and that a PSP version already in development has been scrapped. The game reporting says more of the team expect to lose their jobs the moment the sequel ships. On September 1st, LucasArts confirms the layoffs, around 85 people, 60 of them developers and 25 in quality assurance, which the Los Angeles Times described it as roughly a third of the company. 8 weeks after that, the game went on sale at full price. And that explains every single thing in the second half. The waves of enemies padding out of the clock, the recycled ground where you visit Camino twice and return to Kata Namodia from the first game and get Dagobah reduced to a corridor with the vision in it, the final boss assembled out of the looping sequence, the upgrade tree that leads nowhere. None of that is laziness. That's a game being finished by a studio that was being taken apart around it, for a trilogy that had already been switched off. It wasn't even a one-off, which is the part that gets under my skin. When the first Force Unleashed launched in 2008, LucasArts cut internal development stuff right before the release too. Make the Star Wars game, ship the Star Wars game, cut the people who made it. Which leaves exactly one part of this I can't hand on schedule, because that part wasn't a casualty of anything, it was a choice somebody sat down and made. The game opens in Kamino with Starkiller in a cell and Vader standing over him explaining that he is a clone. That isn't a twist, it's the first cutscene. Vader tells you the original was weak, that this one was grown here, and that he's gone days with no food and no water running on the Force alone, which all but says out loud that there were others before him and that none of them lasted. Nobody watching this is being fooled by anything. And that one decision throws away everything the first game had earned, because the first game ended properly. Starkiller sacrificed himself so the rebellion could exist, and the Rebels took his family crest and made it their symbol. That's a real ending, finished, clean, and it meant something. The sequel swaps it for a copy of him wandering around asking who he is, which is the laziest available way to keep a completed story running. Nothing else in the writing rescue it either. Juno Eclipse is the entire motivation in second game, and I didn't care about her in the first game any more than I do here. Sam Witwer is still excellent. The shouting, the hissing, the anger, all of it lands exactly where it should. The script just doesn't give him anywhere to stand. Critics landed the same place back in 2010, call it an underwhelming story with the plot limping along looking for focus. The IGN's verdict was a Yoda joke with the edge on it. The good game, Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 is not. Then in December, 2 months after launch, LucasArts put a bonus mission set on Endor up for sale. Under an hour of content that GameSpot called sloppy, with famous Star Wars characters rendered in poor models and bad animation, and boss fights that fall over immediately. No third game, no producer, a third fewer staff, and an audience still wanted more Starkiller, so they sold them another hour. I took the light side ending, where Vader goes into Rebel custody bound for Alderaan to answer for what he done, which results precisely nothing. Even by the canon that existed in 2010, Vader is right back at the Emperor's side in time of everything that follows. I watched the dark side ending rather than playing it, and it's so worse. Another clone turns up out of the nowhere, stronger than you are, and puts you on the floor. So 5 hours, and the punchline in that you were never the important one. Great. The third game never came. LucasArts was shut down in April 2013, when Disney bought Lucasfilm and Starkiller stopped being canon that year after that. So 16 years later, Vader is still kneeling in the cutscene, waiting on a sequel that lost its funding before the game he's standing in ever went on sale. So no, this isn't a bad game. There's as much good in it as there is bad. The problem is where the two halves sit. All the good is in the first half, and the bad is what you are holding when the credits roll. They fixed the camera, they fixed the combat, but there was nobody left to fix the rest.